it's going to take that until you capitulate on this one.
I was going to say, I'll have a nice.
He's always a late adopter.
I'll have a nice choose, whereas you'll be getting connected up your ass.
Oh, man, I'll be like,
fuck, Mr. All-In.
I'll be liquidated and being fed to you intravenously. Like that's where in the system I'm going. I'm going to be human food. I don't get a pod.
I'm like, feed me that steak.
So here it is, episode number 24, slightly different to normal, but usual suspects in the house, Dr. Evil, Mr. All-In, and myself, Sir Neverlook. She's here, but she's not here. Mrs. No Show too. So episode 24, we've named The Great Reset. Well, that's the theme anyway. We'll give it its own name and in due course. But for me, I think that this is definitely going to be the episode that gets us cancelled. This is the one. I've been thinking all week. It's like, this is highly topical, highly volatile, and it's going to get us cancelled. So without further ado, we're gonna jump into it. But just to give you a little bit of context around it, what we're talking about right now is the great reset of all of the various different companies that are out there, but how it leads to 2 or 3, let's say. And without further ado, I'm going to kick off. So the first part of it is probably worthwhile. Most of our listeners, shout out to you guys there in the UK, Sweden, Argentina, US, Europe. We know you're there. Thanks for listening, subscribing, sharing. But who owns everything? That's where we're going to start off. Who owns
Mr. All-In?
Mr. All-In is definitely trying to own everything.
He's just a shithouse who hoards all the money and doesn't spend it.
I just aspire to be a Giga Chad. But yeah, if it's all right, I'd like to just go one level even above that, just to start with the Great Reset.
Yeah, sure.
Just to say, you know what? Because I think a lot of people have heard the Great Reset, and I think we've talked about it on here before, but we've just alluded to it in and out. And I suppose like my definition of what the Great Reset is it's what the WEF pretty much claim it to be, right? It's essentially, we've got to a point in civilization where we've grown as far as we can, but we've damaged the planet to such an extent, and climate change is so bad, and our economies and the way we've built our industries are polluting the planet to such an extent. And also now we're such a connected society, pandemics are raging the planet, killing millions of people. The whole general concept is this has gone to a point of no return. And what we need is a hard reset on all of this. So we pretty much rebuild, we build back better, or whatever you want to phrase it. And we essentially build back again, but without damaging the planet. We need to fix it, fix our carbon footprint, somehow mitigate pandemics and eradicate those, and essentially reset the entire world whilst we are mid in it, whilst there's 8 billion people in it, pretty much stop industry, stop innovation, restart it, and rebuild it back cleaner, healthier, with less poverty. And that is what is pitched as the Great Reset.
But is there a bit of a, how would you describe it? A bit of a, one for Davos. Are you allowed to take a private jet there each year?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the WEF is prominent at Davos, and that tends to be where the Great Reset panel get together at Davos once a year. Tends to be the richest guys on the planet. So that's just what it is, right? And that is nothing. This again, what I'd like to do with this thing as well is this is just going to be factual, right? We can go through it, and then
absolutely,
and almost towards the end, I think then I would like to layer on our opinion of what we think this means and what you can whether we agree with it, disagree with it, what you can do about it or not. But what I'd like this to be is almost a little bit like the Bitcoin Standard book and a lot of other Bitcoin books, really, where to begin with, you just talk about the history of money. This is not disputable. This is just facts, it's history. This is what the situation is. Then the final 20% of the book is this is the solution. And then suddenly you start talking about Bitcoin and the impact Bitcoin is going to have. That can be very subjective and it can be wrong. And you can disagree with the final 20%. That's completely fine because that bit hasn't happened yet. But the first 80%, you just need to nod along. Unless you're disagreeing with factual stuff that you have evidence to prove history happened differently, then you
or
have to
disprove what's currently happening right now as well.
Exactly.
I disagree.
With what?
I'm not too sure, but I disagree.
Because I watched a lot, not just the video that you'll see in the show notes, but then the surrounding things around it as well, in terms of the companies, in terms of the Davos report, information about the World Economic Forum as well, and obviously fact checking what we're about to talk to as well. So we really encourage anybody listening to do the same. Again, leave the comments, subscribe, like, and if we're wrong, we're wrong. But yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. Hold on.
So I think Mr. Orlin's probably going to lead us on this one because it's a topic which he is very passionate about.
Yeah, well, it's one of those where I think this is just depending on how far down the rabbit hole you go. This is where it ultimately leads you, right? Bitcoin leads you right to this. Because you once you realize the governments are lying about the money, you go, right, how do we fix the money? And then once you start fixing the money, you go, right, well, we need to fix everything else, right? You need to fix food, retail, tech, banking, media, property, pharma, travel, airlines, mining, tobacco, weapons, electronics, payments, insurance, construction, cosmetics, everything.
But so kind of,
go on.
I know we're not meant to do opinion at this early point, but what you're saying is...
We haven't even put any information out yet, and you're already trying to put opinion.
Stop solutionizing. We need to think about the beginning first.
You are positioning your own Great Reset, but for what you believe is better, whereas the WEF has their own Great Reset for what they believe is better. So what you say about Bitcoin is you believe it'll build back better.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
So it's just that's the thing.
That's the beautiful thing about the Great Reset. When when I listed it before, I don't think there's nothing bad in that. We built up an industry, we're essentially resetting it, and we don't want poverty, we don't want pollution, and we want a fairer society. This all sounds
climate
good.
Change. Yeah.
And this is the thing. This is what I want to get to at the end, because I think you can absolutely make that point and go, this all sounds great. Why would you even be fighting against this?
It's just one to really point out earlier on as we go through it, because it's a really interesting concept. It's not, I think it's one which, in a way, the bit which we're going to touch about that everyone knows, but they just don't talk about. And if someone talks about too much, they're seen as a conspiracist. A handful of people own most of the money in the world. Yeah, we know, but they're controlling every decision. They're ruining your life. You're a conspiracist. So you kind of got everyone knows, but they just don't think about it. I think it's willful ignorance.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your opinion, Dr. Evil, who is that? Who are those people?
Mr. Orlin.
He's definitely on that list. He's at the head of the table.
I think it's hard to say because I think the video which we watched, which Gaz shared, it did point towards the owners of Vanguard family. Sorry, it's not names which I remember. Yeah. But we definitely know people have certain influence which they shouldn't, like Bill Gates, who's thankfully going a bit away at the moment. But you've got, a whole load of people who have too much influence in the world when you kind of are thinking, what does your opinion matter? You've got no political position. You've got no medical training. You've had a very successful business. How are you so influential? So it's not names which I think would be household, which is what the video alluded to. But
absolutely.
Start
let's start at the beginning, because I went through and just to kind of go through that, some of the names that came out to me were the DuPont family, the Morgan family, started by John Pierpont Morgan, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and BlackRock with Larry Fink at the head of that. So yeah, let's start at the beginning. Oh, let me not forget as well the Bush family as well, with both senior and junior.
Yeah,
They're more kind of like puppets, aren't they? They're everyone's favorite puppets, just like the Clintons.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
they're
to kind of get back on topic, the video starts off with going through various different industries and saying, oh yeah, you've got, say, Coke is part of a big group. And then it's like, well, it goes for all these different things. So I'm just trying to think, GlaxoSmithKline and all the other ones, all the food groups where they own so many brands, it's unbelievable. When you realize that, say, going down a supermarket aisle, everything belongs to one company, it's actually pretty mind-blowing. So they look so different. The branding's much, much different. The kind of sole benefit is different. You know, it can vary from health food through to pretty much it's rotting your brain and has no nutritional goodness, to someone who is very kind of like, this will solve your life, it'll give you inner peace. So it's very, very strange.
And just on that though, I don't think it's strange at all, because that's completely natural, right? All these companies set up and originally were independent. There was a chocolate bar over here, there's a fruit company over there, there was the milk producers over there. But what's happened over the last 100 years is a couple of companies got ahead of everyone else and just started acquiring. And what they've realized is, by joining in the brands and making everything look like Pepsi, or everything look like Coke, or everything look like Mars bar, that isn't a good idea. People like the brands that existed for 80 years before, so they leave them in place. And what that does is gives you an illusion that there is still 3,000 different providers in your supermarket. There aren't. There's probably about 5.
And they also make new brands, and they make new kind of like, I don't know what you call it, like units to their company to specialize in these areas to trick you to think it's wholesome.
Yeah, and like you said, they're playing both sides, right? So the same company will be doing the salads as well as the junk food. They don't care which one you buy. It's just, provided you're buying something, then they win. And that's essentially what has happened in every single industry. It isn't just the supermarket. This has happened in, like, big tech is the great one to look at right now, because if you go back 20, 30 years on the internet, there was no consolidation. You know, the internet only came out pretty much in the 90s, and there was thousands of companies, thousands of different websites, sports websites, news, everything, all competing for people's time and attention. And what has happened when you fast forward just 30 years, there's pretty much just 5 websites in the world now. If you're not on Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, or Google, or Apple, you just, well, there's two ways of accessing the internet. That's pretty much through Apple or Google. And then once you're there, you have to go to Facebook, Google, Amazon. Once you're there, right? Everything's consolidated down. The millions of shops that existed all got beaten by one. You now go to Amazon to buy your stuff. I think they're responsible for over 60% of all online shopping is done in one shop. It's unbelievable. And this is just capitalism, right? There's nothing corrupt in this. This is survival of the fittest. All types of, we see it in nature a lot. Monopolies are natural. It's a natural kind of the apex predator will rise up and eat everything else. It's why we like Bitcoin. It's why we don't like shitcoin. We think everything in the end is going to all end up in the apex predator, which is Bitcoin. And we've just seen this happen in society. And it's completely fine. It's just that when you go out there and you think there's millions of companies competing for your time, in reality, the top like 100 companies run everything. They pretty much run everything. And but
then it's digging in the level above, isn't it? Like, this is where it actually gets quite strange.
Yeah, because now the question to ask yourself now is, right, okay, once you've got to the point of there's probably 100 companies running the world on everything, right? Who owns those companies? When you look behind the scenes on who owns the shares, not the CEO, not the employees.
The major shareholders. This is the thing, the major shareholders.
So you've usually got about 10 investment companies, haven't you, on each one?
Yep.
And you've got your Morgan Stanleys, sort of smaller investment. They're still big, they're still really big. And you got, I don't know the names, Donna, you're probably better placed to reel off some of the smaller investment companies.
Yeah. In the UK, there's a couple actually, like Kestrel was one.
Or Octopus, another one.
Yeah, Octopus is definitely one. There's a few. I'll come back to you on it actually.
But then you always have Vanguard and BlackRock listed with every company.
They are normally 1 and 2 as well.
So, funnily enough, the company we work for, they have over 4% share in our company, BlackRock. Yep. And then I think we've got Octopus, who are one of the larger investors as well.
I think they're early investors. Schroders are another one. M&G, Aviva, Aberdeen Standard, UBS, Legal and General.
And the funny thing is, when you look behind the other investment companies, who owns them? It's BlackRock and Vanguard again.
Yeah.
This is
so they're doubling up.
One of my earliest questions is, we talk about owning and investing, but how much does, say, Vanguard own of these different companies, or BlackRock? Is it another 20%? Is it a sizable proportion? Or are we talking 80, 90%? Because I haven't really researched this.
It's typically like 10%, 10, 20% max, but they are normally still the major shareholders within those organizations.
So they have a big say.
And that's why they're typically listed. And because you need to name those major shareholders, so you can see them there.
So typically you'd have, say, Vanguard own 10% of, say, Facebook. Correct. And then there are Octopus, Schroders, Morgan Stanley, and whoever else making up another 40% there. And they own 10% of all those different companies. So we've got, 10% of 40%, so another 4% fundamentally. Yeah. But they have influence over all these decisions which these different companies make, this is fact. We're just trying to go for facts at the moment. 100%. So like we've established that they have, say, roughly 14, 15% of most companies in the world. So it's kind of like a mega hedge your bets. Like we kind of talked about the different industries. So Coca-Cola, Pepsi. Now, all these investment companies are in both of them. The same investment companies, once again, your Vanguard, BlackRock. So they're going to have 10, 15% investment in all of these companies. So Coke, Pepsi, we want to do better with Pepsi. Vanguard, I don't really give a shit, because if Pepsi do better, Coke lose. If Coke do better, Pepsi lose. So it doesn't matter to me, because it's just the scales going up and down for me. Apart from more people start drinking Coke for some reason, if we convince them to start flowering or start watering all their flowers with Coke.
The Gatorade.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they own everything. And I think it is important to say, when you are either 4 to 10% investor, usually that comes with a direct line to the CEO. Yeah. I know that firsthand. So when I work for the company you guys work for, the major shareholders, anyone close to 1%, virtually had a monthly call with our CEO, because they wanted to know how their investment was doing in some shape or form. And he would run through the strategy with them, and they would be strategy guys as well. And they would advise sometimes, and by and large, look, we were in an industry that was, look, they were just going, just knock your socks off, right? But the question to ask yourself is, if they are in big tech, for example, and they have that call with Facebook, what type of influence are they doing there? Because at the moment, people like Facebook, Twitter, they are controlling the narrative. As we're seeing, the fact checkers are coming in. Certain people get cancelled from the platform, other people don't. The question purely to ask yourself is, do the large investors behind those companies, are they having influence over what the narrative that is cancelled and the narrative that is allowed to be talked about? being influenced by that. And
I think couple this with you talking about platforms then, and I suppose another fact to state is they own the news corporations. So they own the news corporations, but what was something which is stated, which kind of never really clicked into my head before was, well, who's doing the journalism behind the news? And I think there's two main journalism outlets, which are Reuters, and I can't remember the name of one.
you're skipping ahead again.
But this is the point, like we're talking about how everything interlinks.
Yeah.
So you're talking about cancer and also the media which is coming out. And I think this is a really key fact, is that the actual media is all coming out the same tube as well. So we own, say, 10, 15%, or even, whatever the number is for Facebook. And we also do it for Reuters, and we also do it for, say, the Daily Mail, or whatever that whole group is called. So you've kind of got almost a stranglehold on the narrative coming out.
Yeah, that's right. But I guess, coming back to it, from what we've seen, two companies always pop up as the most influential, and that was BlackRock and Vanguard. And they're both private companies, and so that means their investors are also
BlackRock
private.
isn't.
So no, they're not private companies. So they are both companies where you can invest in them, and obviously you can follow their shares as well.
I'm trying to remember, because
which is really good, actually.
Am I getting confused? But BlackRock is one which you can invest in, but Vanguard is completely closed and family owned.
I think other way around.
And Vanguard own part of BlackRock.
Yeah.
Yeah, they own each other, yeah. But yeah, because I think weirdly, just like put it in perspective, like I saw the number 20 trillion be posted in the video. So that's roughly what these two companies are worth. And I just thought I'd just Google, how much is the entire S&P 500 worth? And it's less than double that. It came out at 38 trillion. That's the top 500 companies are worth only double what Vanguard and BlackRock are worth, which that just puts in perspective, right? That's how much money they really do have and how much influence they have. That if they were actually properly listed on the stock exchange, because that's the thing, BlackRock and Vanguard, for me, they're these premium brands, but whenever I heard about them, I almost put them in, they were boring retirement fund. Like their share price does not perform that well. It's just boring. It tracks the market. Like almost who cares? And I just and bizarrely, you go, for companies that are this powerful, why don't they have a brand like an Apple, like a Google, like an Amazon? Because by God, they can afford it. They can have the best marketing people in the world pumping their shares. Why are they quiet? Why are these two sleeping giants sat in the background, almost hoping no one notices that they're not there? It just straight away you go, this isn't normal. Why are they not begging people to invest in their companies and come work for them, like Apple does? And everyone wants to be employer of choice. And it's, well, I think behind the scenes you go, well, maybe this is a little bit of the ultimate old boys club. Maybe this is invite only. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why the gentlemen's clubs, when you walk around London, you can't see them. Yeah, you might see a smartly dressed guy standing next to a knocking door. You're like, what's behind there? You're like, oh, that's one of the nicest clubs in London. You're like, well, why is it just hidden? It's like, because the people that need to know it's there already know. If you don't know it's there, it ain't for you.
And there's no big brand logos, is there? I just want to clear up as well. So it's BlackRock that have got shares that you can invest in. Vanguard, they've got the tracker. So that's how you would, obviously you'd follow the Vanguard tracker just before anyone comes in and says, you guys got
But Vanguard is wholly privately owned. Because I remember that was basically the top of the tree. Like BlackRock was a bit below.
Yeah, and that's super bizarre, right? Because why would you ever keep a company that large off the stock market?
Yeah.
The main reason why people put companies on the stock market, by and large, is it's to release equity and give money to the people running the business. Imagine if you were one of the very first founders of Vanguard and you build that up from nothing to I don't know what their share, the 20 trillion is, probably about 15. Let's just say it's 10 trillion. That's an insane amount of wealth. Yeah, that is insane. But you can't realize any of it because you haven't sold your shares. So you can take investment in and then maybe become rich that way. But in reality, what you really want to do is put your shares onto the open market, let retail buy a portion of your shares. And that's when you then become a billionaire or a trillionaire. That's why every large business wants to become successful, goes public so they can then release their equity. So you still keep 10, 20, 30% of your own business, but you give the other 70% to shares onto the market and let people fight over them. And essentially they buy them from you and you now become super wealthy. So it makes building the business worthwhile. For the largest company in the world to never have done that, straight away, it looks sus because why are they so rich they can just leave 20 trillion on the table? It's a lot of money to leave on the table.
Exactly. It's a really good point. And just going back to your other point as well, because it was something that we talked about in one of the podcasts. There's been so many, now we're on episode 24, but it was the fact that BlackRock employees were given a pay rise in 2021 to the sum of 8%. Do you remember that when we were speaking about it? Well, of course they are, because those employees are those in the know about the inflation and also about how much that BlackRock can afford.
So the question that we lead on to is, all right, so Vanguard and BlackRock seem to run pretty much everything on the stock market. Everything that's listed on that stock market in the top 500, they own a big chunk of it and probably have quite a large say as to what decisions they make. So who is sitting behind those two companies? Who own BlackRock and Vanguard? And by and large, when you really sum it up and like really distill it down, number one, they own each other, which further just waters it down. And then a load of investment companies own them, but then they are owned by BlackRock and Vanguard as well. So it's almost money just kind of looping around. But fundamentally, there's a couple of families.
Yeah.
And a lot of these families are also royalty. So our royal family were on there. You know, the Queen and her family. And of course, you've got the big political kind of powerhouses, which are the Clintons, is the Bushes, but then it's the good old Sorros, the Rothschilds. Like these are the names that I must admit I've only ever really heard disparaging comments about. These are like the lizard people that run the world, and it's always been conspiracy theorists. Like, oh yeah, if you're crazy, you think these guys run the world. But let's leaving that to one side.
Kind of just a bit of information, like the Rothschilds is one which I've heard of, but Sorros is not one. Maybe I've just been. It's kind of like
George Soros is the name I have heard the most as the most evil guy on the planet. He runs everything, and whenever you track every single conspiracy back, they end up going, it's George Soros. This goes back to World War II, man. This guy is old. Like, even when you go back to the Nazis and World War II, they were like, George Soros was pulling the strings. It was the Soros and the Rothschilds pulling the strings. It's crazy. Those two names constantly come up. They're like, oh yeah, they started this. They went him do this and that do that. Like all roads lead back to these two families. It is insane. And they still maintain their power today. Obviously, like George Soros is super old now. He's freaking in his 90s or something. So he's been knocking about for a while, but they've all got
91, George Soros.
So I suppose talking about this, suppose, it's not saying what they do, but suppose you're that rich, you kind of think, what would you do with your money? Would you actually, start ruling the world? I mean, putting it out to you two, or would you just buy loads of jet skis and play about on them all day?
I think it's one of those things where I guess the money and the power actually probably corrupts you anyway, because you get people that would start to come around you. You then have a bunch of influence and they would want you to invest in their companies. And by the way, they would then do you some favors, and then you would feel like you probably owe them favors. And before you know it, you just caught up in everything. And I think, personally, it's always easy to say right now, I wouldn't get into it, it's fine, but probably have no choice.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it takes a certain personality. I think ultimately, like, this amount of money would ultimately probably corrupt you in some shape or form, because you get used to a lifestyle,
Yeah.
and then quite quickly you get bored of it, right? You would, when you've got this level of wealth, when you're born into the Sorros family or the Rothschild family, you literally have infinite money. You can buy the biggest mansion in a country. You can buy the biggest yacht. Like, you are that guy. You're the guy with the biggest
You
yacht.
are that guy.
You go off to Monaco, and the guy that Abramovich is looking up the river, and he's jealous of your boat. It's yours, and you've been rocking about in it your entire life, and it's just like you getting in the car and going to the shops. It's just like them going to Monaco and going around on their huge yacht with a staff of 50. It just gets boring, and I think ultimately what they want to just end up doing is, how do I maintain this legacy for generations going forward? And I think that's where the corruption starts to creep in, because you go, right, well, I need to maintain this. And you go, well, how are you going to maintain this? And you start going, right, well, we need to be the top investor in every single company that comes along. So they've obviously done this with big tech. Big tech didn't exist when the Soroses and the Rothschilds were ruling the world. But big tech's popped up. You now look on the balance sheet of all those companies, and they own 10% of all of them. Like, how did that happen? Like, they've got to bully their way on, because they know what's happening. There's a transition of power about to happen. A load of money is going to come out of the old media and into the new one. It's like, hold on, we had the old media, all the newspapers and the magazines. We were controlling the narrative there and owned all the money in those, but they're going to become less relevant. So they just pump a load of money into this new big tech. And now I think some of the ways of them getting into those companies, some of them are completely legit. You just rock up as a business guy and you buy 10%. Other ones, I think, are a little bit more nefarious, potentially, where you start pulling some strings, maybe even using some political ties to then pressure certain companies to go, no, we need our place. We need our 10%. Don't tell us you've only got 3. We're having the 10. Make the other 7 become available. And by the way, for this price, this is what we're paying. And this is where it starts.
But would that price really matter, considering they do understand the monetary system? Because, we want to pay 500 million. It's like, well, that within 15 years, that 500 million will be worth $1 billion, because that's how it is. And they've got the money to throw into these companies to get the influence. So I think the actual value may be a bit of a red herring there. Yeah.
Oh, it depends. It stops the obviously I haven't got any evidence that supports a lot of this. It's just whether, like, as a founder, you could go, look, I'm not accepting this, and it's just whether is that choice really on the table once you get to a certain size. And but yes, just getting back to this, like, who owns these companies? So a lot of the money that comes in to BlackRock and Vanguard, essentially, there's a lot of non-profits that receive money and send money in. And essentially, there's three companies that essentially are the face for how Vanguard and BlackRock put their money to use in the real world. This is where all their profits pretty much go. They go into non-profits. And using a non-profit is also extremely convenient as a business vehicle, because non-profits do not have to open their books. They're not commercial organizations. So it's it's a black hole. Provided 5 billion goes in, if they then just spend 5 billion and make nothing, then it's fine. If apparently there's just weird rules that exist in the world where if you're a non-profit, you don't need to open your books. So there's 3 companies that take the majority of the profit from these 2 companies. It's Melinda and Bill Gates, the Open Society Foundation, which is owned by George Soros, and then the Clinton Foundation. So it seems to be these 3 guys are the faces. And the way the video pictures it is essentially, these aren't the guys necessarily with the power. They're the ones with the reputation and the face for TV. They're good at speaking. They're good at being put onto the media to talk the talk. But this is where the money is being funneled through. And guess what?
It's a good old shop front, isn't it? And it looks amazing for for the charity, because that's what they are essentially. They are charities that they are funneling the money through. I also just wanted to go. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I thought you continue. I'll make my point after.
I was just going to go back to your point as well before. Is all linked to keeping the money in the family as well. There's a really good chart which I've just found on Wikipedia, which just charts the JP Morgan family from, inception right the way through to present day. And it's all about just keeping that money in the family. So there's 132 living descendants of the family right now. And of course, collectively, they are still worth billions years and years later, all through various different trust schemes. And it's amazing how like the tentacles of what they've actually begun way back when in the, which are actually the 1800s to now.
Yeah. And then
I was just going to make a point around this because we've got these three foundations as the main investors. So currently the Clinton Foundation, they're a bit like Teflon, not a lot sticking to them, but there seems to be a lot of shit sticking to Bill Gates at the moment. So I'd love to know what, fast forward 5 years on that one and find out whether his name's still associated, because, pretty much everyone thinks he's guilty, whether he is or not, of being around Epstein and young underage kids. Whether he is guilty or not, it seems to be one which seems to be sticking quite heavily to Bill Gates.
There's not even in dispute, is it? He's on the flight manifest dozens of times. I
think Bill Clinton was as well, but nothing seems to stick to him.
I know Bill Clinton, for me, is a little bit like a Donald Trump, where he's done so much bad shit and completely got caught out for it. Once you've got caught being blown by an intern under the freaking in the White House, in the Oval Office, and you've lied publicly and got away with that, that's like the Donald Trump kind of grab her in the pussy type thing. Once you've done that, it doesn't matter what you do after. It's like, it can't be as bad as that, and I'm no one's cancelled me yet, so you just keep going. Whereas Bill Gates, he had a completely clean record all the way, whereas Bill's is just dirty. So when he got associated with Epstein, it's like, oh, is Bill dirty? Does he like younger girls? It's like, well, we know he did. He shagged his intern whilst he was president. Christ, like, of course, this guy's a scumbag, so that wasn't even newsworthy. Whereas with Bill, it's like, oh, he's the it's
a first timer, isn't it? First timer versus the multiple repeat offender.
And he had the perfect reputation. He epitomized like the American dream, didn't he? Supposedly came from a relatively normal family, built one of the biggest companies ever. Now he spends all his life giving back and solving world disease. And what this has exposed is, oh, hold on, this guy probably was cheating on his missus, potentially with underage girls. And I think what really hit it home is the fact his wife divorced him over it. It's very clear that is the reason why she divorced him. And now it's like, well, that's layered it on. But
I was going to say Gates came from a lot. I think it's very much understated how rich his family were, from what I've heard. Maybe I've heard incorrectly, but it was understated, like, oh yeah, I made computers in the garage. The garage is probably bigger than my fucking house.
I think from what I remember from seeing of Bill Gates is that his mum was involved in political like councils, and she was really the driving force, not the dad. The dad was obviously pretty decent as well, but it was more the mum that was the public figure, and she would coach him to kind of get out there a little bit more. Because
but I think they had quite a lot of money. He wasn't just from a standard 2.4 children.
Yeah, you're right.
And, like Ford Focus on the Drive, it was multi-million pound income probably.
But still, I don't want to like disparage Bill for his Microsoft achievement, because I think that weirdly is becoming the new narrative now, where it's like, oh, anyone could have done it in Bill's position. No, you couldn't. The guy was a genius and worked really hard. There's one computer in the whole of Harvard. He found it when this is going to change the world, and everyone went, "You a moron." And he went, "No, I'm not." And he took a copy of it, took it home, and from there created Microsoft. And then even along that way, IBM tried to come and steal his IP and go, we're the big one. We've got the hardware. You're just the software. No one gives a shit about software. And he went, no. No one gives a shit about hardware. I'm the big boy here. I'm going to flip this deal around. And he screwed IBM as like a 19-year-old kid. And like, there's a lot to admire about how he built this.
Yeah, he
company.
did very well, but I think it's this kind of like urban myth, which I was just getting to, but he didn't come from nothing. You know, he did have a lot of backing in order to form Microsoft, but you give, say, 100 people that backing, and literally it'd only be him who makes it. Sorry, not even 100, a million people. It would just be him who makes it. So, you know, there is definite truth in that. But I'm just kind of digging at this whole thing that he came from nothing, so it's a pile of shit. And then I suppose one which kind of talking about these three non-for-profits, but how did the Clinton Foundation get into that position, considering what Bill did during his presidency and everyone knew that he was dirty? That's what I'm kind of really confused with. You know, how is the Clinton name still so good?
Yeah.
I think they're just rolling the right circles, because they both went to I think it was Harvard, I want to say Harvard University together, which is where they met. I'll do a quick Google in a second, but you know, they were both training to be lawyers. Obviously, Hillary is that lawyer. She was valedictorian, as they say, back in the day. So I think they're just amongst the right people.
Yeah, I just thought they would have picked a different vehicle for it.
But Hillary literally ran for president like 4 years ago. So I think in reality, like, they cleaned it up, didn't they? Like we always say, right? There's a reason why these guys are the puppets, and I think with the exception of George Soros, like that's the only one that doesn't have a celebrity name on it, because you'd never even heard about him until we're talking about him now. So the Open Society Foundation is the one that stands out. It's not branded. That's just a random three names that are like, who the hell is that? And weirdly, until this video, I'd never even heard of that. But I'd heard of Bill and Melinda Gates and obviously the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah.
Now, in reality, what I think and why I think these guys are put up there is, in reality, it's because their brands are very well recognized. They're global names. You've got a president and a CEO of the largest company in the world. And really what matters is, do they have dirt on them? And when you look at Bill and Clinton, they're both on the Epstein flight manifests. So what this potentially means is you have extremely marketable, extremely intelligent professional people that come from very good backgrounds and have achieved a huge amount in society, and the majority of the public will listen to what these guys say. And also potentially the guys in the background, the Rothschilds and the Sorroses of the world, have dirt on them, and dirt on them to such an extent where if you don't follow the narrative, oh, guess what? You know, those pedophile charges and the sex trafficking charges, the FBI might just come knocking on your door. Or maybe you just keep talking about what it says on the bit of paper, and maybe all that goes away and you live the ultimate lifestyle. Just keep it going. So I think in reality, because I agree on the Clinton one, Gates up until now, until the last 2 years, he's been squeaky clean. So he's been thrown under the bus recently. Clinton got thrown under the bus about 20 years ago and carried on. But I just don't think what they don't have is a long list of people with this type of brand they also have dirt on. That's the important part. They need to be controllable puppets, because we always said these guys have no power. These guys are just a vehicle. They're like our politicians. They are just puppets that stand up in front of the media and just say what they've been told. They talk out the PR lines. And I think if they had a replacement for the Clintons, they'd have got one. And I think the whole Clinton campaign was a rebranding of the Clinton name. And I think by and large, when you think Clinton now, a lot of people think Hillary. They don't think Bill.
Bill definitely had to fall back and, you know, take a back seat to the woman that was behind him. And I think, you know, there's a lot of talk about the fact that she was that driving force. She was a good wife that stood by him. I mean, think about, you know, there's humiliation if you find out that your partner had cheated on you just in your own social circle. Imagine the whole world knew about Monica Lewinsky and she stood by him. She's still by him right now. That takes a lot, because she looks at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is, you know, their power, their wealth as a couple, as opposed to, I guess, individually. Individually, not so good, but together.
But Melinda Gates didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, I think Melinda's different because she's definitely, I mean, she is a driving force, and I've seen quite a few interviews with her as well. And she's not one of those types of wives that will just sit back and take it. And again, I think maybe if it wasn't for the subject matter, that she probably would have stood by Bill, but she just couldn't do it. Not when it came to obviously what it was.
Yeah,
I think when you compare
Kelly.
compare Melinda and Hillary, I think they're just different people, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Hillary is like a Bill, or the two Bills, Bill Clinton and Bill Gates. She wanted the power. She wanted to be the face. I think Melinda, you know, again, I obviously watched the Bill Gates kind of documentaries. There's a great one on Netflix. It goes through his life story. She was just one of his developers. She's a quiet dev, and Bill is very exceptional in the fact that he's a quiet dev as well, but happens to also love the spotlight and be able to speak and lead and talk about all this. She isn't like that. She is a stereotypical developer, and she became super wealthy, but I don't think she has any interest in this bigger picture stuff that Bill went on about. And she only got tagged in to the whole foundation thing because it was about helping people and all that stuff. She was like, okay, great. I need a purpose in life. If helping the world is what it is, then great. But I think then once she saw that he had a dirty side, she was like, I'm out. I'll go do something on my own. Whereas with Hillary, it's like, no, I know if I go do something on my own, I'm out of the boys club. I'm just going to disappear. If I leave here, I'm done. And potentially they got dirt on her as well. Let's not forget about all that. You know, they deleted a lot of emails. She was working for Bill while she was in power. So there's a lot of weird things she has done politically. Melinda, as far as I know, she probably has just been doing charity work. And I doubt that they have any leverage over her. So she was also allowed to leave. You know, it's like, I'm stepping down. I refuse to go along with this anymore. And they didn't have anything on her. So she just walks away, you pay her off, and provided she's not going to be a problem, you know, she doesn't have a random heart attack and die of COVID or something. But
you heard it here first. That's why we got cancelled. He just killed Melinda Gates.
because one of the things like this, how do they like leverage some of this power, right? So let's just say these three companies are uber wealthy and they're not for profit. So what do they do with the money? Well, one of the things they do with it is things like the World Health Organization, which barely I don't think anyone had even heard of these guys until freaking the pandemic.
Still don't fucking leave my freedom alone.
These are the guys now that locked the entire world up for 18 months and they're still doing it. Whenever they say the word pandemic or they say vaccine or they say masks or whatever their rules are, that is what every single government on the land jumps to based on their metrics. And where does the majority of the money come from that goes into the WHO? Comes from those three foundations, charitable donations. So already now, where did that? So you've got to piece this together, right? So we've got Vanguard and BlackRock. They put all their profits into these three foundations. These three foundations then power the WHO. So essentially, the WHO really are Vanguard and BlackRock, and really it's Sorros and the Rothschilds and stuff pretty much run the WHO because it's a charitable organization by and large. A load of governments donate to it as well, but the majority of the money comes from these three charitable organizations.
And that, I think, going back to your point before about not being corruptible is really, really difficult because ultimately the people that are paying your wages, that are running the show, are all there. You know, it's them. So if you try to argue, right, well, that's okay, we'll just cut your funding or just shut you down. What are you going to do?
Yeah. And imagine if someone tries to stand up for them, right? Let's say the WHO says something and it would destroy Facebook's business or something. And Facebook want to stand up and be against it. Well, indirectly, they're disagreeing with their investors. And you wouldn't disagree with your investor because they'd be on your board, and they quite often they've got a seat on the board and they can make decisions. So now suddenly you've got a decision that's been made by an unelected authority that's sitting in the middle, and a load of private companies are being affected. Yet the company that is telling them to do a thing supposedly for the public good also the biggest companies in the world are owned by the same independent organization. So there's so many conflicts of interest here.
Yeah.
Where the whole thing of, well, who controls the who, right? Are the who just these, what I would like to have seen from the who is that there is charitable donations from governments all around the world, and it's run by a load of doctors, kind of biologists, and just people that are pretty much retired and just giving back. And it is a charitable, a genuinely charitable kind of organization of a load of independent health professionals who just consult.
Influence.
Yeah. And they're consultants, right? They just give recommendations. Instead, the WHO appear to be a very, very powerful organization that essentially, once they rang the pandemic bell, that's every single country around the world locked down, other than one, actually, other than Sweden. But so that they obviously leverage a lot of power. In Belarus. But
funnily enough, on that one, the Nordics all seem to have scrapped any kind of restrictions.
Yeah, they seem to be coming out of lockdown. Yeah, but yeah, and weirdly, it's because there's multiple potential reasons for that, and we can get onto it at the end. But ultimately, you go, what's the end goal? Because the end goal seems to be like a lot of admission to bowing down to governments.
Let's just kind of like put that one to the end. So we kind of have gone on a bit of tangent on this. So if we'll talk about these different companies. So I think your next point was, how come it's not common knowledge that everyone knows about these foundations are linked to Vanguard, BlackRock, and the link to who?
Yeah.
So I think like the whole thing about the kind of like links, and so on, we kind of got to leave the opinion to the end, because that is opening Pandora's box.
Yeah.
But why is it not common knowledge then? Why is the fact that, because again, I'll be honest, like we just said, until the pandemic, I didn't know about the WHO, the World Health Organization. I wasn't really that familiar with the World Economic Forum as well. Yes, I was familiar with Bill and Melinda Gates and obviously the Clinton Foundation, and then going a layer up again, I wasn't really aware of BlackRock and Vanguard being essentially having a seat at the table across them all. If there's a buffet line, they're in the queue.
Well, let's use the buffet. If there's two buffets, one with steak and lobster, and there's one with pot noodles, you want one for steak and lobster, but they don't want you eating steak and lobster, do they? Because the people have got their seat at that table, whereas you've paid for the pot noodle, and that's all your entrance has got you. Yeah. That's literally what it is. They don't want you in. And so when we talk about the 1%, everyone thinks about people earning over 100 grand, don't they? Not over 100 billion. It's 100 grand. They kind of go, ooh, they don't pay enough tax on that 100 grand. They're only paying 50% or whatever it is in different countries. Whereas, and so you don't want the publicity when you've got billions, trillions, or whatever it is. Well, it would be billions for individual people, but companies worth trillions. You want to sit away. You've got your control, and you're in a cycle where you can keep on investing because you've got so many fingers and so many pies that no matter what you do, it's always going to be an upward trend for you.
Yeah, definitely. And we are talking about the 1% who are the super, super rich.
Yeah. If anything, it's probably like the 0.01%.
Yeah.
Because the 1% is still, it's like hundreds of thousands of people. We're talking about 300 people here. That's pretty much what it comes down to. There's 300 people that essentially run Vanguard, BlackRock behind the scenes. So that's who we're talking about. This is the uber rich. And I think, if anything, the whole narrative that comes from the media about tax the rich and stuff, and we brought that up as almost like a meme, it's hilarious. Really what they're saying is tax the non-poor, but leave the elite out of it, because none of the taxes reach them. And once you're earning billions, we all know that you can use various non-profits and various investment vehicles to pay zero tax, right? These people don't have a jurisdiction. They move their money. It's constantly moving. So in reality, this whole narrative of tax the rich when it's over 100K and up to, say, 100 million, all you're in reality doing is you're taxing their competition. The people that give you the best chance of potentially making a fairer world, that have broken out of being poor and have built businesses on their way to being rich. The poor, it's like crabs in a bucket, right? One crab starts to climb out and another crab grabs his foot and yanks him back down. And every time you can put crabs in a bucket and just leave the bucket there. The crabs will never get out because the crabs will keep grabbing each other and yanking them back down. That is literally what we're like as humans. And in reality, they're standing there holding the bucket, laughing at us, going, yeah, tax the rich, tax the rich. And everyone's like, yeah, you're richer than me, get back down. You're richer than me, get back down here. It's like, yeah, you're completely targeting your anger at the wrong people here.
So
what's funny as well is the fact that the taxpayers' money then goes to the likes of the royal family as well.
Yes.
So when we're being taxed, they're just spending that tax.
Well, they've got to have their silver spoons.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
reality, this is what we always say about, like, oh, why if they've got infinite money, why do they need to tax us? No, that's that kind of the game theory doesn't work out. But in reality, it's like, well, number one, when you do tax the entire population 50%, that does add up to a material amount of money. But yeah, they don't need it. But what they really don't want is you to have spare money.
Correct.
Be able to leverage it and make more. So that's the biggest reason why taxation really exists in the world, and why people like George Sorros and that have trillions, the amount of taxes that get collected is not non-material to his net wealth. It barely moves the needle. But what it does do is keep the poor. And that's what you want to do. You want to keep the poor concentrating on the next pay packet, not being wealthy, building businesses to potentially spend more time thinking about this kind of stuff, so you can actually start gathering up other people that support your cause to then rise up and maybe even threaten this.
100%. If you're not in the circle, then don't think that you're getting in the circle, because I think to that point, it is those people that have got the influence, have got the time, and ideally the money that then start to get a following, and they don't want that following. They want you to follow their rules, do what they say, when they say, and ultimately be dependent upon them as well.
So kind of going back to this point about how these kind of like foundations and families and ownership isn't common knowledge, like we're saying, it's basically they don't want you to know because they want you to concentrate on the rich. And I think one of the points which Gaz tried to pull me back on earlier around the news corporation. So I've seen it in his notes, so I can rip it off. But, you know, mine was linking it to the kind of monopoly on media. So controlling the narrative, which comes out of media, because you've got social media and actual mainstream media, like the papers and news programs. But this is, well, controlling the message which is said about the rich. So we talked about the news. You got the newspapers, you got the different groups which own the newspapers, which are owned partly by Vanguard, BlackRock. And then you've got the actual journalist work. So it's Reuters and ANP. So that's the name of the other one, which collect all the different news and actually do the journalism. So it's the same story being regurgitated with a slightly different spin across the world. And I think the video just epitomized it by echoing the voices. When there have been very similar stories, I think it was destroying our democracy, that kind of statement said across America, just repeating how it's said across all the different news channels, because it's almost a bit of a slogan for when something isn't quite going the way which they want it to go.
It's very telling, isn't it? Because there's something where all journalists around the world have to sign up to be on the European Journalism Agency or something. And then there's an organization that got set up called the Public Syndicate. And this has its own Wikipedia page, which is hilarious, by the way. If you Google Public Syndicate, it's essentially designed to be the one-stop shop for like the ultimate global narrative of what the news is going on. But the Wikipedia page is extremely short. It's just lists roughly what their main mission is. But then it very proudly shows you who owns it. And George Soros, right there. You've got a couple of bankers. So essentially it links back to Vanguard and BlackRock, essentially. Like, these are the guys that own the Public Syndicate. And these are the guys that write a lot of what appears on the teleprompters in front of the biggest news organizations around the world and what the newscasters just read out, which is why there's that terrifying clip that is, and they're all talking about the danger of social media and how fake news is getting out there and it's damaging the democracy. And like there's quite a long kind of paragraph that they're reading there, and there's hundreds and hundreds of stations reading it out word for word, identically the same. And when you really look behind that and you go, well, hold on, what do they really mean here? Because what is this fake news? And in reality, it's news like we're talking about right now. It's the stuff that they don't want you to hear. And when they say it's damaging our democracy, it's like replace the word democracy with your control.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you mean. It's like there's too much good information being, because if I translate what they were saying, it's like there's too much truth happening on social media where people are hearing the other side of the story for the first time in 30 years because we've lost control of the narrative. And it's challenging our control over what you're thinking. And this is very, very worrying for us because this could end badly in big revolutions when you realize how we've been fucking you for so long. But it's just massaged and PR'd and just managed into this beautiful little piece, which is you need to stop reading social media as much. A lot of bad news on there. Trust us. Switch Facebook off. Watch the news. We tell you the truth. It's your democracy that they're challenging. It's like, in reality, what is a democracy? That's just everyone is allowed to have a voice. And then we vote for who we want, who we think has the best voice. And then we choose them to lead us. So there's always been bullshitters and liars in every single democracy, in every single society. But a democracy, if it is working effectively, roots out the liars and the scammers. And even if you do end up voting one in, you quickly realize it, you vote them out and you put another one in. So it's almost like a self-fixing thing. Democracy is designed to be able to have all the information on the table. So fake news shouldn't be a problem, but they seem extremely threatened by it. And in reality, as we've seen, what's really transpired is certain people have been cancelled, certain types of views have been cancelled, but you can still spread fake news about a whole variety of things and no one cares. It's just, if it's about a pandemic or maybe about George Soros, then maybe that's the stuff that gets the warnings and you get shadow banned, whereas everything else is, oh, that's fair game.
Yeah, the podcast was nice. Thanks for listening, everybody. It's been good knowing you.
I think unless we actually manage to get more than 20 listeners, I don't think it'll get cancelled.
Yeah, no, we're not in danger of shadow banning just yet.
I was going to say, even that video which we watched, that had a couple 100,000 views, I think, and that's still sitting there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I suppose kind of putting it back onto the rails again.
Yeah.
How does this lead on to the bigger picture then?
Once we go. Well, yeah, this probably just takes us back. It's the full circle, right? So we've started with the Great Reset. This is the final 80%, right? So everything else up until now, provided we probably gave too much opinion along the way, but this is where all the money is.
just couldn't help yourself.
Yeah, I think we all did it. It's hard to do it without it's a podcast anyway. We're meant to be chatting about it. If you want the factual stuff, like watch the video. The video is 45 minutes. It is very little opinion. It's just fact. So where we've got to at the moment, like all companies are owned by two companies, right? Who owns the companies? A couple of families.
And I think we can't debate that one. It's just how they utilize their power, which is a debatable thing.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So and we've already touched on the WHO. So the WHO are now dictating health policy globally. We now have all roads, essentially, the WHO is almost a distraction. That actually seems to be almost like, a bit of a puppet. They don't really care about the WHO. It just happens to have become extremely useful in the last 2 years. But up until now, it's been, it's pretty much just like the little GP that sits in the corner. But the real big daddy in this conversation is the WEF, the World Economic Forum, which I love. I don't know whether this is completely coincidental or it was on purpose. It was founded in 1971. So, which is a nice little date, And so it's just beautiful. It's been around for exactly 50 years. And yeah, this is the whole Davos thing. Everyone that cares about the environment jumps on their private jet and goes for a week holiday somewhere in Europe. And they all meet.
And they talk about how they can change the world to make it better for the poor, but have never been poor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the 50 years that these events have been going, the poor have only got poorer. Wealth inequality has only
Pollution's got worse. Climate's got worse.
And they've got stronger and richer.
But they're doing all these things. When you read their website, they're meant to be saving the world, right? And and guess what they're saying now? They've failed the last 50 years, but this time they're really going to do it. And they're not going to do it by small steps. Up until now, they've been doing, they think they've been making incremental changes, and they claim loads of small victories, but by and large, they are virtually admitting they've lost or they've failed without directly saying it, which is where the Great Reset comes in. And this is Mr. Klaus Schwab. I want to make Klaus a household name. Everyone needs to know Klaus Schwab, because
he is the face of the WEF, isn't he?
He's the CEO, yeah.
But it's
The
interesting.
guy who kind of emerged from being a university professor to lead the global organization.
Yeah, he has been around for a while, but like you say, in the shadows. And it's not until you really start to dig deep into these videos and understand that he's been talking about the Great Reset since 2003, from what I saw.
Yeah. And it all started originally when they started the Great Reset. It was purely around climate.
Yeah.
They've been trying to do stuff, and essentially they're very smart, right? They do a lot of marketing, and they do panels, and they gauge public sentiment. And so when we've been being told about climate change and the various ozone layer and sea levels rising and all that kind of stuff, they've tried to put in numerous restrictions, and they've tried to change people's behavior with various things. And I think by and large, our lives have been changed to a certain degree around how we recycle. And I think a lot of people are aware of their carbon footprint, and a lot of companies are. But by and large, they haven't really made any material change. And
that's because it's the largest corporations that cause the biggest damage.
Exactly.
It's something
who owns them?
It's something like 90% of any kind of pollution is caused by these super megacorp, or whatever you want to call them.
Exactly. And who owns that? Vanguard and BlackRock. Or who are in charge of fixing it? Blackrock and Vanguard. It keeps going looping round and round and round. So why do we get told? So this is why I think this is the whole narrative around where climate change just didn't have the impact. It didn't drive the kind of human change that they wanted in people, which is why I think they've redone it. And the whole pandemic thing they tested it, right? They tested the pandemic. They had an event called Event 201, which essentially was directly a coronavirus pandemic role play.
It's based upon SARS, wasn't it? And we had a couple of SARS outbreaks, which is kind of some rationale for why they picked a COVID virus.
Yeah, yeah. It's a flu, right? It's a very common, it's the most likely thing to have happened, right? The flu goes around every year, kills a couple of million people. So what if we have a flu that is more deadly and it kills 50 million instead of 2 million? That's the role play they did. And they literally just went, oh, what do? We have to do lockdowns, masks, vaccines, all that kind of stuff. So they role played this about 5 years ago. But 10 years ago, we had swine flu. And there's a great presentation from the guy that was essentially the original Fauci, that is the Belgium guy where swine flu kind of hit Europe the most. And he gets up there, and this is obviously a WEF presentation that he's doing in Davos. And he just goes through how he manipulated people to be scared of swine flu, even though he knew it was nothing to be scared of. He just wanted people to be scared about it because he was working for a pharmaceutical company who had landed huge deals. And he goes through his playbook, and it's literally exactly what's just happened when we look at Corona. So day one, you need one voice, one message. You can't be political at all, because that means you get on every channel. What have we had? Every single country, we've had one guy, very clear marketing, very clear taglines. Early on, you have to get the death stats out there. Big predictions. You've got to list the number of deaths per day, and they've got to sound scary. Because, and he even laughs about it, right? He goes, in a couple of months, there's going to be 7 deaths of H1N1 every single day in Belgium. And he turns to them and laughs and goes, there's 7 deaths a day, every day in Belgium of the flu. So I'm just, but they don't know that.
Yeah.
So
that part of the video really hit home for me. I was just like,
yeah. And everyone in the room,
guys,
everyone in the room chuckles as well. They're like, ha, people are stupid. And this literally reminds me, when did this happen in the UK? I remember this happening in March 2020, when they were first justifying lockdown. They went, 15,000 people died this week. It's the highest we've ever had. And they just left it at that. And I saw this 15,000 number on every single newspaper, on every single website, on every single TV channel, and it was repeated for weeks. The first thing I did when I saw that number was went, that sounds awful. How many people usually die a week in a typical March? And I went and researched it.
Like a true Bitcoiner.
Don't trust, verify, right? And it was like 15,300 or something. I looked into it. I went, there's the deaths website. There's all you got to do is go UK deaths. There's an official government website. I downloaded all the spreadsheets for the last 10 years. The average number of people that die every single week in the UK was 10,000. So I went, okay, 15,000 looks high, but 10,000 means it's an average. Half is below that, half is above. We were in March. The average number of people dying in March is 15,000. They weren't lying when they said it was the highest we've seen in a decade, because when I looked at the numbers, it was high 14,000 and low 15,000. The number that I think back in 2009 or something, we'd had 16,000. And then 5 years ago, we'd had like 15,290. Whereas this year it was 15,300. So straight away, I realized they were using a number out of context to terrify people. Because when I first saw the number, I was terrified and went, wow, 15,000 people dying this week. That is insane. And you go, guess what? On average, every March, 15,000 people die a week. And the extra 5,000 comes from the flu. And when they say it's the highest of all time, they basically mean in percentage terms, it's a 0.1%. And when I dug into the data even more, because everyone was so panicked and kind of gathering together death certificates and all that, it looked like some data from last week had been put into this week. And when you actually look at the 2 weeks separate and you average them out, it's actually below what a normal flu season is. And you go, I think they may have shoved in 1,000 deaths from last week. And that could be purely admin error. Right? Everyone was freaking going mental when the pandemic first kicked off. So it could be completely by mistake. But the way they pitched that was intentionally alarmist. And you can either say that that was alarmist for clicks and for money, or it was to instill fear because they wanted compliance around the controls that were coming, i.e. masks, lockdowns, and vaccines.
Yeah.
So that happened perfectly. He then goes on to go, the first death, and as the deaths happen, make big announcements, put pictures up there, make people are scared. He then even goes, create FOMO. So use celebrities. And he said there were some footballers in Belgium that apparently skipped the queue for the vaccine. And instead of like shaming them, he actually went, oh no, this just shows you, right? These millionaires want the vaccine. They're skipping the line. And it tricks the masses to then go and get a vaccine that they never really wanted. And they were predicting at the time, swine flu was supposed to do corona type numbers, right? Like the original modeled corona numbers. Tens of millions of deaths were supposed to happen. Hundreds of millions of people were supposed to be ill. In reality, what happened with swine flu over the next 10 years? These are 10-year numbers. So less than 8,000 people died of swine flu. Yet 60 to 90 million people took the vaccination. I have no idea why the numbers are so large. I Googled around this a little bit. I have no clue why the numbers are so far apart. But
yeah, I was going to say, also with swine flu, I think it was more, it was alarming because it was linked with food. You can't get away with food. You can get away from getting close to people, wearing a mask, isolating, but yeah, it's interesting they didn't go back to that one.
Yeah. But then but then what happens? So of the people that died, these were mainly old and vulnerable people, right? These are the classic people that died. Tend to die from flu-type viruses. Swine flu was a flu. It was another coronavirus.
Yeah.
But the people that got affected the most were the children. So there was 700 cases of narcolepsy. This is just people just collapsing. They no longer can control their brain. Their brain just switches off and goes to sleep randomly. And there was a vaccine called the pandemix vaccine. And yeah, there's numerous examples of quite large payouts. Well, I say it's only quite large because the highest I could find was 120 grand went to a 7-year-old boy. But there's another 60 people in the UK alone, mainly children, that have got payouts. So by and large, you look at that and you go, right, how many people potentially were saved as opposed to how many people died there? And you go, who knows, right? It looks like it was a vast overreaction. The number of deaths never modeled anywhere close to what it was. It followed a typical flu season in Belgium, yet they vaccinated 90 million people. And there's a couple of thousand kids here that are now suffering for the rest of their lives. They were permanently disabled. These people cannot work. They can't lead normal lives. It was, narcolepsy is not a funny thing that sometimes you see where people just drop off occasionally. It means you can't drive. You can't go to work. Like it's very dangerous. Like you have to literally walk around with like helmets on because you can just hit your head on something. You'd be walking and you just fall asleep. And you can kill yourself just by hitting your head on a curb. So yeah, and it was just, I think for me, that out of the whole video, it was the most shocking bit by far, because obviously it relates to where we are right now. And it just showed the utter contempt for the guy that was the Belgian Fauci, of how he manipulated people, and just seems to be proud of it. Because this presentation he was doing in 2019. So it was 10 years later, and he was reflecting back on what he did in his younger years. And he was so proud of it. And the people at Davos were laughing at how easy it was to control the population and how much money they made from the vaccine. And obviously they don't touch on the after effects or the deaths and the horrible conditions that they caused these thousands of kids. They don't touch on that. I researched that separately to this and added it in. But it's where we are now, right? It's the same people controlling us, and they seem to be using the exact same plan as they used for swine flu on corona, but they've gone well beyond the Europe part of it. Almost, it seems like swine flu was a little bit of a trial run to see whether they can get Belgium to comply and a little bit of Europe. Corona, right from the beginning, and I think with the help of the WHO, they rang a global bell for this one, not a country bell. And this is what we're in the thick of right now.
Absolutely. The classic phrase, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, comes to mind with this one. They've trialed it, it kind of worked, and now we're in the midst of it. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But we know the playbook. We can see what they're trying to do, and you're just going to be mindful of it as well.
So we've talked about all these kind of scenarios. So COVID and etc. What you're bringing into and the WEF and climate, and then one thing which I don't think we really touched upon is the WF, the kind of slogans which I've been talking about. So Build Back Better. So what does that mean? We've talked about all these kind of how would you almost say, characteristics of these different shadow organizations. They're planning this. Now what? So they've increased the wealth of those people astronomically over the last 18 months. They've increased the power, the holding, the fear. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I guess building back better is, unlike the Immaculate Conception, which is Bitcoin, there will be flaws. Technology has advanced. We talk about the news and we talk about the media. People have become their own form of media now, which is really difficult to censor thanks to the likes of their devices in the palm of their hands. So I guess building back better is really looking at what has changed and how they can combat that. and get around it to then again regain the control.
So how did they lose control? Like, this is kind of like I can't dispute some of the facts. Obviously, there's a bit of opinion which we talked about before, but what control? You know, they've obviously got control. What more control do they need?
Yeah, I guess ultimately, well, before, no one would have really known, and it would have been very difficult for us to research into how intertwined they are with all of the companies, and how all of the companies lead into these two companies, and then the WHO and the WEF and so on. Whereas for us now, it's just been a couple of clicks of a button, hasn't it? You know, we've gone away, we've researched it, we've watched the videos. All of that wouldn't have necessarily been as easy to do a couple of years ago, or decades ago.
So they'll want to remove some YouTube clips. I just don't understand. Like, this is literally points which I can't dispute about ownership and potential power. Whether they use it or not, it's a big question. It's interpretation, or rather, critical thinking. But there's still this point, and I don't understand that. I don't understand. So, what do they need the power for?
All right. Well, this is them. It's building the moat around what they've got, right?
Correct.
So this is all you got to do is we've got the perfect. This is like during the pandemic, we've got our control group, and it was Sweden. Everyone ignored it, but whatever. Our control group here, we have places like North Korea and China. This is that is potentially where the Great Reset is leading to. And you go, all right, well, what do China and North Korea do? Well, they limit travel. You can't leave unless you have a government-approved reason to leave the country. Oh, what's happening right now? You need a government-approved passport to leave the country or enter the country. Government purposes or anything like that, in and out, all the last couple of years. Plebs, sit down, shut up. Then you've got, right, well, how much wealth can you make?
Why do they want you not to leave?
Well, we can get to that. Because ultimately it's the ultimate power and control, right? They want a communist society where you own nothing and you're happy. They own everything. You clean their toilets. You sweep the sheets. You have no aspirations to ever want more. You just do your little job. They'll send you a little food parcel. They'll keep you safe from pandemics. They'll jab you every night before you go to sleep, and you wake up and you clean the toilet again like a good little boy in the morning. That's what they want. They want a master and slave race. That is the end goal.
But isn't it already in that way?
No, it's absolutely not. No, because we're here now. Right now, we've got a free internet. We have the ability to make money. We have the ability to travel. I can move at the moment. I can go into a different, more friendly tax jurisdiction. At the moment, we can set up things like Bitcoin. We can talk about it remotely. We can send money everywhere. At the moment, there was a huge threat to the overriding George Soroses of the world that if millions of Bitcoiners all get together and we do buy a country and we go and start setting up, then that is going to be extremely hard to suppress. So instead, what you do is you just force everyone home. You censor things like the internet, right? This is the China, North Korea model. You literally design your own versions of Google. You control the social media for keywords. You cancel people that speak out. You create a social credit score via some form of app. That is what China have right now. It's like a Black Mirror kind of episode, but essentially this single app, and this is what everyone thinks that the vaccine passport will morph into, is essentially it's going to also have your credit score baked in there, your identity, and also your credit footprint. This suddenly now dictates, am I allowed to go on holiday this year? Oh no, you've ordered too many things from Amazon. That means your carbon footprint says no. Oh, you haven't been vaccinated this week. That means you're not allowed to do this. This little app is what they already have in China. And if you speak out against the government in China, they cancel your app. You can no longer go and buy anything. Cash does not exist in China. This app goes off. Other people in society have to help you out. And what that also does is, if you know someone, so say I got cancelled, right? I get cancelled from the China app.
Definitely happening.
Yeah, it's definitely happening. weirdly, you guys would be affected because I
Yeah.
transacted with you socially and monetarily through our bank accounts. Your credit scores also fall through association with me. So it encourages you to go, I need to cut off all association with Gaz now because he's blacklisted. So when I ask for money and go, I can't afford my rent because I've been cut off, I would come to you guys for help. But if you are seen helping me, you get dragged down. So essentially what it does is it isolates people. And the only people that you ultimately can ask for help from is the government. We become isolated human beings that can't trust each other. And we ask the government. This is the crabs in the bucket, the divide and conquer type methodology. And what is happening right now? When have we ever been more scared to even talk to another human being? People are screaming each other down the street for mask, no mask, vax, no vax. People are hating.
Petrol, no petrol. As we film right now. Yeah.
And who do we look for advice? We turn on the TV and listen to Bitty.
So obviously you've got your prediction of what's going to happen.
So straight away, I would ask you, why do you think they're doing it? Because now we've gone through it all, right? They've got all this control. They're doing all this. What do you think they want? If you don't think it's that, do you have another rational explanation?
I think it's a mixture of governments wanting more control and corrupt individuals and governments wanting more money.
You don't think there's an overarching plan?
Or is it too far to think down the line? Because sometimes it is. It's just mind-bending.
I think it's too far to think down the line. And I think it's such a wild concept at the moment. And I think it's a whole thing of why would they suddenly just do it?
But the Great
2020.
Reset, the Great Reset is on the WF website, right?
Yeah.
And so they want to. Like,
so what were their claims about the Great Reset? So you got organ printing instead of transplants was one of it, wasn't it? So you basically have a plastic heart or rubber heart, whatever it is.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah.
You got less pollution.
Yeah.
You've got
help the poverty. Help the poor.
Yeah, help the poor. And what was the main one which everyone shouts out, which is
climate change.
No, you will own nothing but be happy.
Yeah, you will own nothing, and you will be happy by 2030.
I suppose it may be dependent upon what they're actually classifying. So it may be consumables. It may be looking at, this is obviously ignoring various things, but it's looking at, well, you play a PlayStation once a week. Why the hell would you own one? Because it's a ball of plastic and metal. You can rent it one night a week and someone else can rent it one night a week and so on. So there's 7 people, and instead of like 7 consumables being there, there's now 1.
Yeah, well, I think cars is a great one. I don't think everyone needs to own a car. Potentially, like if you get autonomous cars, you just call a taxi, right? And an autonomous car rocks up, takes you where you want to go, and then it goes and drives someone else. We don't all need a lump of metal on our driveway where 95% of the time it's sat there. Why not have 100% capacity of these things, and they're just driving everyone around constantly? That sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think it's quite hard to think about. I suppose one of my questions would be, so you predict all this, how long till it happens? Is it 2030 or is it over the next couple of years?
It's happening now.
Yeah, well, it's all, yeah, well, like we've always said, right, this is already it's a long play. So the prediction is by 2050, that is where we will be, where we'll essentially be in a position of world communism, where there'll be a single world government and we'll be reliant on handouts. That is the prediction. By 2030, we won't own very much. They'd have essentially stolen property, and all in the guise of climate change and saving you from pandemics. They need to raise a huge amount of wealth, because that's the thing, right? What they list is the benefits. They don't list the cons. And the con is higher taxation and stealing of property from the world. It needs to be paid for. You don't get to rebuild the entire world for free. And guess who pays? We do. Much higher taxation. We all have to also agree to a much lower carbon footprint. And what that means is we can't have consumables. We're not allowed to go on holiday anymore. And this is not what's being spelled out. And it's being pitched as this great big nirvana thing. And yeah, it essentially gives them the perfect excuse to go, yeah, you're not going on holiday ever again. And I know, and this leads me back to the great quote that's in the Sovereign Individual. He predicts this. He predicts that when economies are about to collapse, and one of the great ways of imprisoning its people to make sure the workers stay in place is to pretend that there's a pandemic on, and that is the perfect excuse to close the borders. Any other excuse to close the borders will be met with violence from the people. Pandemics work. Pandemics, not only are you scared, you can also play by you traveling, you're going to kill grannies. So other people will pressure you to not travel as well. And by and large, it will work. The 99.9% of people will not fight those restrictions. And it's where we are right now.
As the weird one or the inconsiderate one if you were to travel.
Yeah, and your own family would be like, that's out of order.
Yeah. So what would make you think that you've actually made a mistake? It's not happening.
Yeah, well, I'd need to see some people that are acting with data. Like, this is the thing, right? 2 years ago, I was already 98% convinced the Great Reset was legit, and there was 300 people running the world. The last 2 years, like, come on, like, I could not be closer to 100%. Like, if I missed it all in, I would be all in on this bet right now. I have had 18 months of examples of where all the data lines up, where health professionals and politicians to protect the people should be doing one thing, and they did this. And they've done it time and time and time again, playing into, oh, okay, this is not a health-related decision they're making here, but what it does do is make more money and adds more control. It's another layer. They keep inching and inching and inching and inching forward. And literally, if we rewind 2 years ago, I'd love to have been able to have a conversation just in like, oh, imagine what would you do if the government told you to stay at home for a year? I reckon most people will go, hey, fuck off. I ain't doing that. I miss my holidays. I'm gonna do all this like that. It would be a conspiracy theory, especially if you also then went, oh, by the way, these are the death numbers. You'd be like, no, no chance this happened. You would think that's a film. Like, the death numbers would have to be 50 times higher to justify that level of damage they did to the world, and they're not, and we're here. So they need to start making rational decisions based on data. If I start seeing rational decisions based on data that I can verify, I'll start to go, oh, these people have got my best intentions at heart. And I don't mind if they make money off the back of it. If anything, I want to see them making money, because then at least I go, I know people are not charitable in nature, especially these kind of guys. So even if they're doing a good thing for the planet, they're still going to be making money on the side. I want to be able to see it. And if I can see it, I'm like, okay, great. That's where you're making the money. When I see something, they're like, no. We're giving out vaccines and we're doing it at cost. I just go, bullshit. No, you're not. Let's have a look at your costs. And suddenly I see some CEO getting paid 15 grand an hour, and that's part of the costs. You're like, you fucking lying bullshitters. Your costs are not that high. You're inflating your costs. And then on the balance sheet, it looks like you're balancing money, but the books are crooked. Just be honest and say you're making money out of the vaccine. And I would be more liable to like buy into it, because I think you're at least giving me the truth about the money. When you lie about the money, I'm like, you're lying about your books. How do I know you're not lying about the contents of the vaccine? Because you're not giving me truthful answers.
It's a really good point. So I think as well, to add on to this, is the emergence of central bank digital currencies, because you will then hand over your current fiat money and then go into the central bank, the CBDC, and therefore you will be reliable on that form of currency even more so. So, working towards this cashless society will mean that anything that you get is then converted into the government money and not, I'm going to say it, not Bitcoin or something else. And again, it's just that extra form of reliance upon the government. And I'll be honest, I wasn't really a big like conspiracy theorist or thinking that the government is that bad, but the more and more research that I do, it's just like they are the biggest gang that's out there. And what I mean by that is, you know, it's a small circle gang that just continues to feed and feed
But
itself.
surely doing big things like this, it is risking that power.
Yeah, that's why they're doing it slowly.
Yeah, definitely.
Why they're doing it over a 50-year period, and this is the thing, right? You inch. You don't take over an entire civilization in a year, because you get revolt, you get pushback, you do it over generations. And weirdly, there's a great video actually on how the Russians did it and the KGB. And essentially they said it takes 30 to 40 years to take over a civilization, because what you need is a couple of, essentially you need to educate them right from children, right the way through. And by the end, once you've done...
So this is the kind of left-wing thinking moments. We are seeing a rising number of young left-wingers who talk about how good communism is.
Yep. And to a certain extent, like that is, it's very like, it's a bit of a meme, isn't it? That when you're young, you're a communist, then you grow up and go out in the world and you become a conservative and a more of a capitalist. So there's some truth in it.
And when you become a Bitcoiner and become very disgruntled.
Yeah, but essentially the way you do it is, and this KGB guy, he was terrifying. He was talking about this and how they'd already done it to America.
He's like in a chat show, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was an ex-KGB guy, yeah. And essentially he was saying how, and I just look at this over just over the last 2 years, right? Where essentially you get so much propaganda into someone's head and you convince them of a narrative. And he goes, once you've convinced someone, and typically it takes 30 years, like literally from birth until they're 30, you convince them of a thing and it's a lie. And once you've done this, you can come into the room with the categoric facts, proven, evidenced, and present it to those people. And they will outright reject it violently because they just can't admit that their whole life has been a lie. Their whole personality and being and life. And he just go, and you're done. You can just walk away and you can do whatever you want with those people now. They are so convinced that lie is true. They will reject anyone that says different. They will purely follow the people that have led that agenda. And
so I look at inflation is good for the economy.
Yeah, which is probably a weaker one. But at the moment, obviously, with like the pandemic right now, right, the whole masks and vaccines, I still see it. You know, there was a celebrity on Twitter with virtue signaling. They were on a train, they were wearing a mask, and he took a picture of the train, and he was the only one in the carriage wearing a mask. And he's like, I can't believe I'm the only person here that cares about others. And there was thousands of comments. Every single one was supporting him, talking about the COVID idiots all over the train. And you just go, this is it, right? They've had 2 years of being told masks means you care, no mask means you don't. That's all they see. It doesn't matter how much data you put in front of them now around comparing Israel and Sweden. It just doesn't matter. Israel, you've got full lockdown, 98% vaccination status. Sweden, no lockdown, like 60% vaccination status. They're completely open. Israel back in lockdown. It's literally the opposite of what should have happened. Doesn't matter. It bounces off. You might as well talk to a brick wall. If anything, the more I talk about the Israel-Sweden comparison, it feels like the further I push COVID Karens into their COVID Karen box and they put their mask on even tighter. And I go, this is what they're talking about. This is how powerful propaganda is. You can literally walk up to these people and present the facts, and they will act violently at the person that presents it. Instead of saying, thank you for the correct information, they will go, how dare you give me fake news?
Yeah.
And it's where we are. And in reality, so weirdly, when you look at this and you go, this has been the perfect way of softening up the population, right? Because I think and this is the whole like, oh, why now? Why I think when you look at the inflation of the monetary supply around the US dollar, which is obviously is the dominant global currency, they haven't been the dominant global power for about the last 5 years. China have overtaken them. And the dollar is losing value at an alarming rate. And I think they need to do something. They know it's going to collapse, and it's going to be potentially chaos. Imagine the whole of America being Venezuela. And when you look at a lot of these big powers, they need the big Western countries and the big Western businesses to continue. So what it looks like they could be doing here is they know their 100-year reign is about to come to an end. So they're softening up the majority of the population, and they're making them weak. And making them weak is, we need to get them out of their big groups, out of their social circles, isolate them at home, get them very fearful, get them dependent on their 5 o'clock news update every day. And then when we bring in the other things, which is, oh, by the way, we're going to tax the hell out of you. You're not going to travel anymore. And you need to do more menial jobs and just start taking handouts. They'll be more likely to accept that set of changes because we've cut them out of their social groups. They haven't been chatting with their mates around the pub for the last couple of years, slagging off the government. We've alienated them all because masks, no mask. We've changed our story so many times. No one knows what the fuck to do. Again, this was another thing that the KGB said, is you throw in narratives, but they conflict and confuse. So no one knows what the correct story is anymore. So people switch off and just go, look, I just know I need to be scared. I don't know why, I just need to be. So, and no one's got a straight story from start to finish because everyone's got a different variant of it, depending on which story you believed and when you dropped out. And I literally look at it and go, that's exactly where we are right now. Most of the people that I know have gone into a point of apathy. They just don't care anymore. They've switched off.
I switched off ages ago. Didn't watch any of the updates that were coming out. Nothing. I was just like, yeah, I'll find out when I find out.
Yeah, and isn't that awful, really? Like I used to grow up like watching the news on purpose. I wanted to know what's going on. I wanted to know what's going on in politics. Now,
absolutely.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, I stopped listening to a lot of that, largely because it was just a lot of bad news, and then I realized a lot of it was just propaganda. But I still kept
found Twitter.
Yeah, but you still keep in touch, and but there's so many people now that I know that just are completely out. They go, I just want to live in my little house, and I want to just bring my kid up and just leave me the fuck alone. It's just, I've had so many arguments on Facebook and Twitter. Like, I'm just done. I don't want to have any more arguments with someone in the supermarket. Whatever. It's like, just, I want to go get my shopping. I want to go to my school. And it's like, do you know what you sound like here? You sound like a little drone. Your will has been broken. Whatever they do next, you're just going to go, okay. There's loads of people that I know.
Path of least resistance is like in the human nature anyway. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Especially when it's been like, and the majority of people that I know that took the vaccine did not take it for health reasons. They took it for an easy life. Well, I don't want to be locked out of stuff. I don't want to not have the kids not be able to go to school. Give it them. And what I honestly do think the vaccination is, it really is a test of, if we can get them to do this, inject something into their body and into their children that they know is untested, but we will just tell them, we think we tested it all right. We're pretty sure, even though vaccines take 10 years to be fully ready, we're just going to do it in 1 year, see if they notice, put some guy in a lab coat and go, it's all good. And if they take this and risk their own lives and also their kids' lives, then we got them. We can do whatever we want next, because that is this is literally like the psychology experiment. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it, where you get a guy in a lab coat and you come in and there's a little dial and you go, there's a guy on the other side of this screen. Every time he answers a question wrong, you have to buzz him. And the guy on the other side of the screen is an actor. He isn't really getting buzzed, but the guy on the other side doesn't know this. And the buzzer goes up, and eventually it goes up to the point where this guy is screaming on the other side. And they just want to see how far the human on this side will go. Just because a guy in a lab coat says buzz him, will he impose that type of pain on another human being just because it's a random experiment? And it's something like 70% of people go all the way to death. They keep buzzing this guy until he stops screaming because he's imitating being dead. Only 30% of people at some point put that buzzer down and go, this is wrong. I don't care what this experiment is, but I am out. And they walk away from authority. So that is what I think literally the 70-30 model seems to always come up, because look at what we've got around vaccinations. It's about 70-30. 70% of people complied, buzzed all the way, and they took the risk because the authority told them so. They wanted an easy life, follow the rules. Hopefully I get out of this experiment and I get paid. Only 30% got up and went, fuck it, I'm out. And I think by and large, what do you do to the 30%? They're the dangerous ones. You alienate them. You could turn the 70% against them, call them anti-vaxxers, call them conspiracy theorists, try and lock them out from fun events, big groupings. So the only people socializing now, the only people allowed in the pubs and the big events that are going to be chatting are the compliant ones.
Yeah.
But now all the people that are revolting have been cut out of social circles and they're kind of alienated from society. And I must admit, one of the things that I don't like the thought of, because I know that they're definitely going to use that list. I'm already on numerous lists, but now I'm also on the non-vaccinated list. And I know there's one of these guys is looking down this list going, these are the problem. These are the guys that when we start
multiple offender, Mr. All in again.
Yeah. Well, I just know, like, if the kind of the Australian kind of example ever happens, and you just get caught randomly not wearing a mask in the right place and you get wrestled to the ground. When they take you in just for processing, I just know when I get processed, I ain't coming out of there. They're gonna be like, oh, we've been waiting for this opportunity. We've been waiting for a slip up, Mr. Freaking All In. Welcome to fucking hell.
Yeah, this is for your health, definitely. One of the things I wanted to go back to as well is mentioned about they're going to do it slowly and obviously over a generation. And that's because following from some of the research that I was doing, they don't want you to also be able to pass it on to your family. So by not doing that or not allowing you to do that, essentially means that your kids, they start at square one, as opposed to a little bit further up down the road because of what you've built and then passed on to them. Because that means, obviously, they get out a lot quicker, in half the time, potentially. So, so that, again, is one of the key factors as to why we are going to come on to, I guess, the ultimate Bitcoin, and why it's good as well. Unless there's anything else you guys want to cover before we get into that.
No, I think it's what it all kind of circles back to, because we can't talk about the Great Reset and not circle back to a whole pod reason.
Yeah. So what the fuck do we do about it?
Yeah. And it's the same reason why you would opt out of the monetary system. You just stop playing their game. Stop collecting pounds and dollars. Just convert them into real money. And because this is the thing, right? This is where do they get all their power from? It ultimately does come from the money. And the thing is, it's going to be rough. I thought about this a lot. I've been asked this question a lot by a lot of people. And I do think the next 50 years, if this plan continues, and look, there's a chance they might pause it. Right? They're very smart, calculated people. And if they think there's a risk of breaking too much and there's too much revolt, they will stop and they'll ease off. They'll ease the pressure. They just just open the bottle a little bit, let some gas out before they tighten it again. It's a very kind of controlled thing. They're not just going to rush to this and have it all just blow out the sides, because they can't put the toothpaste back in the pipe if it all comes out, and they don't want a revolution on their hands. So
on that though, do you think that the likes of like in China and North Korea, they've already started going down this path?
I might go and live in China. Sounds nicer.
Yeah, well, bizarrely, I think it is actually a genuine option because they've already gone through it. So at least you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, exactly.
I went to China. The food was great.
Yeah. There's 100 million people that have already been censored, let's say, in some form or fashion from the, I don't know, over 1 billion people population that they've got. I don't know if it's about 1.2, 1.3 in China. So ultimately, you could just, what you're getting into, what's happening, if you're compliant, and it goes back to the whole path of least resistance. If you do X, Y, and Z, you'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah. The challenge is going to be, it's the thing is, like, if you go through the China model, there's millions of people right now in concentration camps, and also they call them re-education camps as well, which by and large, your only crime there has been speaking out about the government. So they put you in there to re-educate you on how kind the government is to you. So I do not want to end up in one of those camps. And I know I'm on the list. If this all comes in, I'm getting put in. So this is the thing, right? You have to buy Bitcoin, but then seriously, being self-sustainable is a big part of this as well, being genuinely self-sovereign. So I honestly do think like people need to really consider looking for the most friendly government. There could be another outlier that could become a self-sovereign country even that you can move to, because I can almost guarantee if you're in big cities in America or Europe, if this plays out as they're going to over the next 50 years, it's going to be rough. There is going to be mass riots, and the police are going to come in strong. I think they're role playing it at the moment in places like Australia, and they're just seeing how they can handle it and see how far they can push an isolated community, because they're completely cut off. It's insane how cut off people like Australia are. They can't get across borders whether they even want it. They've locked out people from Australia for 2 years now and haven't let them in because they haven't got a decent reason to come home to visit their families.
Yeah.
Apart from celebrities.
Yeah, celebrities and politicians come in and out. It's a joke. Yeah. But yeah, it's serious, right? Like literally like going back to learning basic skills like how to vegetables and looking after some animals, because this is the thing, right? It's going to be the supply lines, and trying to get as financially free as you can as well, because they can't take the money off you that is already self-sovereign in Bitcoin, but they can take your wages and they can take your property. And the Great Reset even has this all laid out. They're going to steal those things. It's in the Great Reset manifesto. So if the manifesto gets rolled out and gets global support, which I hope it doesn't, but if it does, they will be stealing property off everyone. Obviously, only the plebs. Vanguard and BlackRock will continue owning all their property, but it's fine. You can rent one off them for a very reasonable rate, and you don't have to worry about maintenance. They will send someone around.
I was going to say, and you don't need to worry. Yeah,
they'll sell it to you. It'll be a benefit. The fact that you do not own your home anymore, it's like you don't have to worry about it.
Don't need to worry about that mortgage hanging over your head.
Yeah. You can move anytime you want.
Yeah.
Move next week and go to a new house. Then move again. When in reality they go,
the new house that we also own.
Yeah, I've got a family. I don't want to move every week. Like, yeah, fine, I'll do it when I'm 19 and I'll move every couple of months. But even that's a pain. Once you get pretty much past 30, you want to settle down roots. You've got schools, family, friends. It's like, no, I'm good here. Okay, fine. Just rent that place for 50 years. So, but yeah, I don't have a good view of the future, but what the big benefit is that we do have a solution. And the last 12 years, we've got Bitcoin. You can buy Bitcoin and you can take it with you. Because if you have any other type of wealth, and let's just say a random country pops up and it is El Salvador. Let's just say it's El Salvador and you want to go there. You've got to think through, right? You're going to have a reason to go there. You're going to have to try and get through the borders somehow with various passports. It's going to be tough. You only have to get there once. The hardest thing by far is going to be, though, is how do you take your wealth to El Salvador with you?
Yeah.
You've got it in bank accounts, in property, and in stocks and shares. I can guarantee you the second your passport goes out, they're not going to let you get it. Yeah, you're going to be blocked. Your money will be locked into whatever country that it's locked into. They will find a reason to block any transfers over £10,000 from going out of that country and hitting an El Salvadorian bank account. So just convert it into Bitcoin, put it into 12 words and take it through the borders, pop up in El Salvador, and boom, whatever wealth you had, you can take it with you. It's being able to relocate and go to a safe jurisdiction is going to be, I would say that would be nowhere near the top 10 priorities for families right now. I think over the next 30, 40 years, it's going to be one of the highest priority items that you're going to have is, can I take wealth with me?
Yeah, 100%.
And bizarrely, even shitcoins, you can do it even with shitcoins. As much as I slag them off and stuff, hey, shitcoin, providing you put it on your ledger, it's still can get through borders with it. I wouldn't recommend it, but hey, shitcoin is actually weirdly better than having a house over the next 40 years. And that is weird. Weird to say, because at least with a shitcoin, you probably might lose 99% of your wealth. But with a house, you might lose 100 because they're just going to nab it. At least you still got 1% left.
Even dink doink.
Dink doink. But yeah, have you guys got any of like, because go on, Ross, you don't believe any of this. You think it's all going to be fine. They're doing this for our health. And the pandemic's going to be over in another about a week's time, isn't it? And we're all going to be going back to roses and back to school.
I just can't work out what's happening. I don't know if it's a push. I don't know if it's to get some power. I just struggle to comprehend that it's going to be all these things which you're claiming. You know, that's where I sit. I sit somewhere in the middle. I know it's not. I know it's not right.
When do you think it's going to be all fine then? When we're going to be, if this isn't going to happen, like, or if it does, like, they're going to ease it in, and they're still going to allow us to be in a democracy, still be capitalist.
Well, we're fake capitalists, aren't we?
Yeah, of course, yeah. But like,
Yeah.
but let's just say, let's pretend the capitalism we have today is real. We're going to stay on this, right? And they're going to let us stay on this because I think there's a good argument to say that we would, because they're still at the top. The top 300 people still own everything. They're controlling every single company, every single government. So there's a very good argument to go, why would they break a model that's already working for them?
I wouldn't say I'm steadfast in any of my kind of beliefs, because obviously evidence emerges of different things. The whole thing about Bitcoin, you know, is a prime example. But, you know, my kind of opinion is we've had a power grab by governments and by the elite. They got the money. And now I think they're going to gradually ease it off and we'll go back to normal until they decide to do it again. You know, an example of this would have been World War One. When they did that, there's no reason to have a world war for World War One, was there?
No.
At all. You know, two, I know it was some conspiracy theories, but it's based to do with Hitler, which was created off World War One and all the issues. And that's my honest opinion. Is I just think we're in this kind of like weird scenario where they're doing a power grab like they did 100 years ago. Power, money, and then they're going to go back and leave us alone, but things are going to be destroyed. We're going to have consequences off the back of this, which are going to be very unseen. Well, which can't be foreseen. I think that's where I sit, because I'm struggling to, like I said, I understand the evidence which is stacking up, but it's that point which I kept on, you know, questioning yourself and Sir Neville. I don't understand how you skip over there.
Yeah.
But you know, like I said,
I would just ask you why then. Like, why would they have done all this? Because as we've just shown you, even 2 years ago, they already owned everything. There was no reason for more money. They already had infinite money. They controlled all the companies and all the governments. Why would you, for 2 years, create a fake pandemic and lock everyone down, kill loads of people, if you're not trying to go to the next level of control? Because
why did World War One happen?
Well, at the moment, we weren't off the gold standard and all that kind of stuff back then.
Yeah.
Weirdly, World War One, that was the Britain's reason for coming off the gold standard.
Yeah, so I just literally think there's going to be a reason which we're not really looking at.
Yeah,
well, I think it's staring you right in the face, and we presented it to you and you rejected it.
Like I said, I'm not putting.
But why? Seriously, like, just think it through. Like, if they've already got all the money and all the control, why would you put everyone through this, which risks waking all us up? You know, like how we were talking about how, like, you've woken up this last 2 years because of these measures. Why did they do that when they already owned everything? Like, on paper, everything. Why would you do it?
I think there's going to be something which we're really not thinking about. That's honestly, I kind of know it's very vague, but I think there's going to be some situation where, you know, in say 10, 20 years time, you go, oh, fucking hell. You know, it's a proper, what's his name? Paul Daniels moment, pull something out of the hat.
But even though all this money and all this power all ends up filtering in to two organizations called the WHO and the WEF. They both happen to have 50-year plans called the Great Reset. But you don't think it's anything to do with those two things. It's something else.
I don't think it's as bold as you say.
I think one of the things as well, it goes back to the human trait of wanting to overpower other humans as well. Because if you look back in civilization, people have always done it. You know, there has to be one or, you know, a couple of leaders in respective locations, and they want to control those people. Thousands and thousands of years ago, it's been happening, and it's just repeated time and time again, all of the various different civilizations. And this is now, for me, no different. It's just you've gone through the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Romans, you know, ancient China, Greeks, every one of those, you know, various different civilizations. There was always an ultimate ruler or rulers and the people.
Yeah,
this is it.
It's the alpha male. Like, yeah. What happens when you put, you know, 10 puppies and let them grow up together? They will fight until the alpha male is revealed. They'll keep fighting, and eventually, and then if one of the other dogs doesn't agree that the alpha is the alpha, then they will fight to the death, and they will figure out who needs to go, and whoever wins becomes the alpha. The other 9 kind of look around and go, we know what happens. He's the badass. And for a period of time, he continues to be the alpha male in the pack until he gets old. And then a young pup will challenge him and overthrow him. And I think in reality, what we're seeing here is the US dollar is a bit old. It's old on its legs. It's looking a little bit weak. And there's a new young pup on the town called Bitcoin, and we're snapping it at its heels. And it's
could even be the Chinese yen.
Yeah, it could be the yen. Yeah, the yen could be the pack next door, and it's coming over the hill. Yeah, and I think that what they're doing is going, shit, we don't want to go into this fight. The young pup here and the big wolf across the valley, we think we lose these fights now. So what do we do instead? Let's change the rules of engagement. We're not going to fight tooth to tooth anymore. We're all just going to, let's lock everyone down. Let's make fighting illegal.
Or at least slow it down, because it's gaining more and more momentum. You know, like it's we all love sports here, don't we? So when the team starts to get an upper hand, what do? You either kick the ball out of play, you feign injury, you make a substitution, you do something to stop it, don't you?
Yeah.
And then, as they say, it's a reset, and you reset it, and then you go again. And hopefully it slows it down. The thing as we know, with Bitcoin is that it started off as a small thing and has continued to grow. We're now seeing it eclipse gold in terms of, catch up, not necessarily eclipse it, but, you know, it started to eat into gold. The gold market is declined over the last year, or even actually the last decade, when you think about it. And what's been happening in the last decade is Bitcoin. People aren't buying into that. And I guess a lot of the old money as well was in gold. You know, the royal families, the governments all had gold on their books.
Illicit people.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, guess who owns 10% of MicroStrategy?
Vanguard.
Yeah.
Of course they do.
So indirectly, they do own Bitcoin, or at least they'll get the price gains.
You made me think about this, because
that's amazing.
When I was reading through this, obviously everything circles back to Vanguard and BlackRock, but who's to say that they don't own because there's 1 million coins which exist within a wallet.
Oh, and by the way, who owns 10% of Coinbase as well? Same guys.
How do they manage to get around every company? This is the thing that I don't get, how they've done it. They've managed to infiltrate.
They got so much
everyone.
money because you think they earn dividends on every single company on their investments. Those dividends pay for an employee, back those dividends pay for another one. So literally they're invested in say 10,000 employees, in 10,000 companies, that's 10,000 employees. Plus you got inflation, and they know they can pay below that. So they can just go on this big cycle, which is pretty much unstoppable.
When you really peg it all back as well, like where's the majority of wealth created? It gets created by the money printer. It doesn't get printed out in the real world. And so where does the money printer money go? Well, in 2008 it all went to the banks, and in the last 2 years it all went to the pharmaceutical companies, and since beginning of time it's gone to all the war contractors.
Yeah.
And as we know, who owns those companies? Vanguard and BlackRock. So the money printer money ends up in their hands. So they essentially got it for free, and it just gives them a war chest to then go anything new and innovative, just buy 10% of it, all of it. It doesn't matter if it works or not. It doesn't matter if Bitcoin works or not. It can all go to zero tomorrow. They will lose billions on paper, but they don't care because it's all just about building the moat.
But this is my point. Like, sorry, I was trying to get onto it, but we talk about all these investments, but surely they own Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
You know, that million Bitcoin, which never moves.
Oh, right. Are you saying that they arguably could be like have Satoshi's coins? It could be, oh my God, imagine if Satoshi is George Soros. It's the ultimate 4D chess.
Plays you
I
for
would
shit.
I would bow down to that play. I'd be like, George, take it all back. That is.
And I think it's just, I suppose the kind of, you question me on why I don't believe in it, but I suppose it's maybe a question of what would make me believe in it. Would it be when I've got a gag in my mouth, I'm getting whipped, when I realise it's just your dad?
Tuesday night in the Ross household. Weirdly, I was actually thinking about this. Like, I don't know how you got onto that, because exactly I actually thought when Mr. 10% will freaking capitulate to this, he'll be in the pod getting all hooked up, and someone will be just closing the lid on him, going, "It's for your own benefit. We're saving your life." And just before it clicks, I'll flash into your head, and he'll be like, "Gaz was right," and it will go click, and it's over. You're in the freaking matrix. You've been all tubed up. Like, it's over.
I think it's
going to take that until you capitulate on this one.
I was going to say I'll have a nice.
He's always a late adopter, but
I'll have a nice choose, whereas you'll be getting connected up your ass.
Oh, man,
we'll be like, fuck, Mr. All-In.
I'll be liquidated and being fed to you intravenously. Like, that's where in the system I'm going. I'm going to be human food. I don't get a pod. I'm
like, feed me that steak.
I think ultimately our favorite 3 words: just buy Bitcoin.
Yeah. There's nothing which you can do about this if it is true. Apart from buy Bitcoin, hedge your bets.
Yeah. Let's even assume like the Great Reset is not true. In reality, inflation is. So you still should buy Bitcoin. Yeah, they're still corrupting the money, even if you don't believe that they're corrupting your freedoms and your health, but they are 100% corrupting your wealth. So buy Bitcoin just for that, because at the very least, over the next by 2050, the pound and the dollar will 100% have collapsed. There is 0% chance they survive that long. So you have to be hedged against that anyway. So buy Bitcoin. And I would love the fact that that's all that happens. That would be brilliant. If all this authoritarian control comes along with it, because what I ultimately think is going to happen is one of the drivers is they don't want to lose. They're going to fight to keep that from failing. And to keep it from failing is they're going to need to make you believe that these currencies still have value. And to make you still believe that, they need to cut you off from real information. They need to cut you off from your friends and family. They need you to rely on something that's probably non-monetary. So you just get food packages in, every month instead. And you don't realize that that food package is actually worth like £500,000 now. And you would never be able to afford that yourself because the currency is hyperinflated and the pound is now virtually worthless. But I hope none of that happens. I hope they don't fight. I hope we have a nice peaceful transition. They accept Bitcoin as the future, and we all live happily ever after. And the government's just step to one side. We have our Bitcoin politicians step in their place, and it's all happiness and roses. But I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit tougher than that.
Yeah, definitely. A couple of places that we could go, as we know, El Salvador. They say Miami is the Bitcoin capital. Texas as well is known as a state within a state. So that
but it's still in the US.
Yeah, it's still in the US.
I mean, Scandinavia potentially.
Yeah,
the Democrats are trying to steamroll the whole of the US, so I just don't know about that at all.
Yeah.
Scandinavia seems the place, but it's obviously one to watch because we watched Sweden and no one paid attention to Sweden, apart from the conspiracy theorists.
Are there any companies that are listed that BlackRock or Vanguard have not infiltrated? I'd be really interested to know. Like, is there a decent size, and I mean like decent size, big company that's out there that's privately held? And again,
you'll get all the ones which have what we call zombie corporations, which they basically survive through monetary inflation. So in a real kind of like stable coin world, they would just die because they're not making a profit, but they're basically living off inflation on their goods, so they're basically useless. Those are the kind of companies, but I wouldn't know how to identify them. You probably have to have a good Google around them.
Yeah.
Also what you'd have to do as well is, even if you manage to find a top 500 company that isn't got Vanguard or BlackRock on there, whoever are the investors, you then have to go, but are they owned by BlackRock or Vanguard?
Yeah, of course.
Because it just seems to be, it doesn't even matter if you, because it actually surprises me that they're almost this stupid by putting BlackRock and Vanguard on there. If anything, at this point, I would have, if I was them, is step that away, put out 1,000 different investment companies that work on behalf of Vanguard and BlackRock.
Correct.
And then
that's what they have.
Do the whole
and mix them up. But well, they have done that exactly. But they're stupid. But the main holdings are still in BlackRock and Vanguard, so they still appear at the top of the list. It's a little bit silly. Just take your names off it and let the smaller guys go up there, because it just hides it a little bit better. It would have been harder for us to piece it together, but as it is, you can Google any top 500 company, have a look at the investors tab, and it's got Vanguard and BlackRock in the top 10 every single time, usually number 1 and 2. It's like you sat there in plain sight. This is easier to hide, guys. Come on. You're running the world. This is running a conspiracy 101. Don't make it this easy, guys. I want to work harder for my conspiracy theory.
Is that though? They literally are hiding in plain sight.
You want to work harder for your soy burger.
Your meat freak patty.
I think that's probably a good place to leave it. Now we kind of like wandered into soy.
Your happy place.
Well, hopefully for everybody that has listened and tuned in all the way through, that's been an insightful one for you. This has been episode 24, brought to you once again by Dr. Evil 10%, Mr. All In, myself, Sir Never Look, and she was here, but she wasn't here, Mrs. No Show. Peace out, boys. Yeah, fellow plebs, if you want to hear us, then tune in.